Can you all hear this?
I can hear you now.
I can hear.
Thank you.
Morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
We're chatting and we're sort of waiting for people. We don't even have a quorum, do we? 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 4.
I just got a text from Farley. She's going to be a little late.
And we knew Barb was going to be missing. She's traveling. So, but Marcy should be on her way. And Alan Delwich. Alan,
Debbie, I just lost the audio.
sorry, I'm not broadcasting the sort of the gossipy parts.
Oh, okay. I just didn't know if something happened.
We're just talking about where is everybody and why. But so we'll, I'm going to give it, it's 8:34. I'm going to give it another 2 minutes and then we're going to have to make a decision about what we do. Hi, guys. We're still sitting here chatting just to let you know, and we have no eyes on Farley yet. So we're just gonna hold for another few minutes.
I
And
guess,
because we don't have a quorum, we can't get any real business done.
yeah, you have 4. Huh.
Yeah, we have 4. We could. You want to do that without Farley? My worry is that we'll be or Jim, can you call Farley? Since
Yeah,
you're
sure.
just hanging out, would you just call her and ask for her ETA so that we could either get underway or decide we're not doing this?
Yeah, she doesn't often pick up, but I'll try. Hey, are you almost there? Oh, okay, because they're stuck with only 4 members present right now. Oh. Oh, great. Oh, Jesus.
Jim, you're not muted.
Okay, okay. Debbie, did you hear that? She's coming in right now. Yeah.
Thank
Okay. Sorry. Bye-bye. Yeah, she's walking in right now.
Yeah, we're just hearing the story. Thank you, Jim. We will get somebody to start the recording in just like a minute or so.
Okay.
Okay. I'm only seeing 3 participants. So guys, we're getting the recording started and then I'll call us to order. It does. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call us to order at 8:47 and ask for any public comment. Seeing no public, I am going to move on to approval of the September 15th, 2023 minutes.
Move approval as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. And the financial report.
Yes, you've got August financial. And there's certainly not much going on. We have, at the end of August, we had 856,000. I still haven't gotten an invoice from Becca for our 10,000 contribution to the DDA process.
Okay,
And I asked her also to bill us for, usually the auditor charges us $1,600. So I'll remind her that she owes us those, but other than that, on page 3, you can see year-to-date, we have, and I think probably through the end of September, we may have collected more of the property taxes. This shows 129.77, and we've got 130 we should be getting. So there should be a little more there. And then you can see the expenditures again, the big one being what we had paid on the demo of the LaFun. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
any questions for Ann? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to accept the financial report for September.
So move.
Second.
Jim, that was a second by Alan Gregory. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. Old business, the communication plan. So Jim did send out the current plan that we're working with for Mad Woman Marketing. That's Carol Campbell's company. And so at the moment, it looks like we are paying her $500 a month for the social media strategy and management only. And then she gets hired as on an hourly basis for events. And as we know from this spring, she also produced our annual report for us. And that was also under a fixed fee contract that she proposed to us in the spring. She did give us an expanded communication plan strategy at that same time that included a website update, refreshing our creative package, and doing, she proposed regular email outreach to constituents, however we defined constituents or stakeholders. So at the moment, what we wanted to do was to talk about her existing contract, which is the piece that Jim sent out to us, not these other pieces. But I think it makes sense to sort of talk in the context of a larger marketing strategy, what it is we want and what it is we don't want, and where we are at with this whole issue right now. So I'll just open it up for discussion. And unless Jim, you have any other, if I mischaracterized any of that, let me know.
No, this represents a totally different scope than what she originally had. What, pre 2019, 2020, I think, Ann and I renegotiated this with her. So this is what the current one looks like.
Okay, thank you. So thoughts, ideas?
Well, initially, I mean, I don't, just listing off the things that you just talked about, is that happening? Or any?
That's a good question. I mean, what I see is a flurry of activity whenever the city posts something, then our social media strategy seems to be at the moment to repost whatever the city has done or whatever other organizations along the avenue have done or in the Manitou area in general. And that's it. We have so far, as I can tell, no original content beyond the specific media strategy we asked when the LaFun was sold and coming down.
Right, she did do that.
Yes,
Yeah.
she did.
But I agree with you. That was the only thing that was kind of original that I
Right.
recall.
I'll give you my opinion. Well, first of all, I don't use social media, so I don't get anything that is put out about the URA. And my question would be, how do you assess the effectiveness of what we're doing? And I don't know how you do that, but it's certainly not effective for somebody like me who doesn't use social media. So is there another avenue that we could or should be using that would reach the audience that we want to reach? And to me, that would form the basis of a plan. And this is a social media plan, as far as I'm concerned, plus a special project plan. And I think she does fine on the special projects. I can't evaluate the social media, not using it. But I think we need something broader, and I don't know what that is because I'm not a marketing guy.
Probably.
I do think that there is a space for social media. I think it's very specific to the area of the URA. And right now, by pulling all this content, which by the way, can be done through a program called Loomly. That's what the chamber uses. Crane uses for $300 a year. You set up the content that you want pulled from other websites and other social media sites that feed into yours. Simple. It's very simple. We love it. $300 a year. I just want to repeat that. And I do think that there's a space for that where we can be talking about the art installations, the bike ride stations, the things that on social media make people happy.
And perhaps even things like your feed from Adams Mountain and
Correct.
the other businesses along the avenue that have social media of their own.
Yes.
To me, that content is more relevant than what the heck is happening down at Ruxton and the Avenue, right? Like
Exactly.
we're the URA.
Mhm.
If you want to know about Ruxton, there's other places you can find that content. You
Right.
don't need to look for it with us.
Right. And she might even be using this Loomly or like something similar. It's just that it's too broad. So if you set it up, you can set it up so that it doesn't, I don't know, I won't get too deep into Loomly, but you can set it up on a schedule so that it posts once a day, once a week, once every other day, whatever you want. So it's very, very user effective that way. And I do think that there's a space for that. But I think for the day-to-day work that the URA is doing to achieve our goals down there, I think there's a different way to approach that. And I really believe a lot of it's through the bulletin. I think we need to maybe have a consistent statement to the community on the work that we're doing down there, the work that's been done. I think the consistency piece is the most important part when you're talking about a board that's, like I've said before, we're not sexy. So it's not about sending out flashy things every quarter or every 6 months in the bulletin. It's about like a consistent, maybe monthly statement from the board president about what's happening in the district. So it's just very, it's full of facts and information and consistent.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think something like a monthly report or quarterly, at least quarterly report in the bulletin would probably reach a lot more people and would target specifically what we're doing. We could have put some emphasis on the new facade improvement grant approach, and I don't think that's been as well
Yes.
disseminated as it could have been.
I was just going to say, if I were to pick a first topic for something like that, that's what I would pick is the facade improvement grant and and that whole strategy about sort of beautifying the boulevard.
And I think that's a great idea. And starting it now, because business owners are going into the winter where they really can't afford to do any, even if it's a partnership, but they'll remember it in the spring. So even if you did it like 2 or 3 reminders over the course of the winter, it'll pop up again in April when the money starts flowing again.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then they will be in their mind. I love that. It's a great idea.
Alan, do you have any thoughts about this?
Not directly. I'm just wondering, given the Urban Renewal Authorities, where we are in our life cycle, and what we have yet to accomplish, I guess I'm cautious about I think we need to maintain a public presence. But I'm not sure, and I think the facade improvement is important. But other than, I'm not sure we're gonna attract a whole bunch of new buyers. But I do believe we have a responsibility to report what we have been doing or what we are doing. And I'm not sure that, frankly, that we need all of Carol's help to do that.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, that would be one of my questions as well, Alan. I like the points that you raised, that we do have an awareness piece that we need to keep before the public of just about our progress and also about opportunities to engage with us. Then we've got the development piece, continuing to communicate with property owners. And can that be done in a new or different way, especially with Jim now being remote? Do we have to give some thought to how we do that kind of outreach, especially for property owners or business owners that are local? And then there's the piece about just the sort of updating the development community in general, or trying to have the right brand strategy for how excited we are about opportunities along the avenue, right? What's possible along the avenue. And that I hope that we get a couple of minutes to kind of debrief the candidate forum last night, because it struck me that very little of the conversation about the Urban Renewal Authority and the east side of the avenue was positive. It wasn't about we're excited to see what's possible there. It was all about nothing's ever going to happen there, and we're except putting up a parking lot, which got discussed a great deal because of the parking crunch downtown, not because of the opportunities on the avenue. So there's sort of a narrative there that I think we need to be changing. We need to be changing the conversation about what's possible along the avenue. And we had those conversations a decade ago. So it's probably time to sort of refresh the whole thing.
There was, though, I would point out, a lot of discussion about a grocery store. Which
Yes.
is, of course, exactly what we're working on.
Yes.
So
That
while
was
they didn't
positive.
necessarily recognize or acknowledge that it was a URA strategy as well, there was a lot of discussion about that.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. And the beer garden, Alan and his beer garden, which is still a really great idea.
I'm not sure that this is a great idea, but I do just want to put it out there that a lot of that narrative is coming from some neighborhood meet and greets that are being led by people who do not support the URA, that it's becoming. And so, one strategy could be to have our own neighborhood meet and greets. Now, it would require quite a bit of time on our part, some organization, getting out invites and all of that. So I don't know that we really have the bandwidth to do it, but it would be another way, in a grassroots way, to talk about what we're doing and maybe counter some of that narrative.
Right. Any other thoughts in terms of what we would like to see at the moment? Because I think the issue before us now is, what do we do with Carol's contract? If we don't believe that this current strategy is an effective one for us, then do we put a pause on it and just pause our social media? Or what would you suggest, Farley?
I would leave the social media as it is currently, just let it run. However it's happening. I'm assuming she's using a similar kind of platform to pull content. I don't think Carol's going on there every morning or paying somebody every morning to go on there and line it up.
She was sort of intimating that she was.
Was she? Okay, all right.
I
Well, then,
thought so.
okay. But I'm just so that we don't just disappear off of there. But I do feel like we need to pause the contract for this extra
Yeah,
work.
none of that's
This-
moving forward anyway.
right? And I think we need to put it out to bid, but we need a job description or a description of services. And maybe a little committee of 3 people off the board, and Debbie could work on that. And then I say we go back out and rehire. I think we need a really, really different model for the URA. And I think one of the things I said last time, and I still stand by this, is that we have to have somebody in the room at our meetings. We are, I think it's really hard to talk about URA and, for lack of a better word, I don't like to market the URA. You have to be in the room and really hear what we're doing. It's a complicated sort of, it's difficult for people to understand what URAs do. So you really need to have somebody in the room that's listening and learning as they go along. You can't just read the minutes and then throw something out there and think that it's going to stick.
Yes, John.
So what if we ask Jim to draft a plan? A communications plan based on the discussion we've just had. And to me, the elements need to be social media, and I'll say affordable social media, because there's apparently a way to do that. Monthly or close to monthly article in the bulletin that basically says something about what we're doing. Something about development grants and how we promote that, whether that's through the bulletin article or elsewhere, in order to create awareness of what we do. And then we need some visionary, I'm looking at the bulletin now, but article that basically indicates what the opportunities might be within the URA. So those are the elements that I heard in the discussion here. If there's more, let's add to it.
Jim, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with what John's saying, and it could easily put together a rough scope for the board to review. As far as a monthly, quarterly, whatever update to the bulletin, that's something that I could probably throw together myself with Debbie's help, and not have to pay somebody else to, a huge fee to do. That's just a thought I had when we were talking about that.
Yeah, it could be that what you need to do, Jim, is to create this scope and then figure out which parts of it you could actually do, so that if we have communication help, it's more on the presentation, consistency, wordsmithing, creative side, right? Like if it's an ad that we place in the bulletin, then what's the look and feel, all of that kind of stuff, but that we're providing the content just as you're describing. So I like the idea of having Jim draft something, and then Jim, if you would sort of look at which pieces you think you could do and what you think we would want outside help with, and maybe bring it back to a smaller team of us to look at until we feel like we're at a place to bring it back to the full board. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And I like Jim's involvement because he is the person in the room every month and therefore has the information.
Yeah, he is our consistency for sure. And also our liaison to the development community and the property owner and business owner community. So Jim, you have a better idea of what's working, what's not working when in outreach to them. And if that's going to be part of this strategy to try to generate more interest or enthusiasm or excitement for development along the avenue, then you have to be weighing in here. You have to be part of this conversation.
Which of you would like to volunteer to help with this? Farley's got her hand up. John, should we ask Barb? Because Barb's really good at it. And she's not here. The likely candidate. She'll be very disappointed in me for saying that, but it really is true that she works closely with the communication world and she's good at it herself. So I will take on the responsibility of reaching out to her since I'm the one who raised her hand for her at this meeting. So Farley, Barb, Jim, and I am happy to weigh in, help, whatever as well.
Open meetings law would only put 2 people on it.
That's true.
So
Okay, so let's call it Farley and Barb working with Jim for the moment. And if Barb says no, then I'm going to come back to all of you. Or try to help myself if I can. Kind of depends on what else is on the plate. Sound good? Okay, thank you. Moving on, Executive Director Report, Jim, what's up?
Not a ton. Really, I think, the thing that we're working on is the fund and nothing has really changed since last month. I think they're kind of in a holding pattern, quite frankly, trying to see what's going to happen with the election. They're not bringing anything new forward. So that's the impression I get. So I don't anticipate much happening until the end of the year with that one. Other activity, the Martin property seems to keep going back and forth in flux. We did have it was under contract. It was under contract to the landscaper, the guy that does all of our snow removal work. He wanted to turn that into his shop and probably rent out the apartment in the back. That fell through. Doing some of his due diligence on it, I think he found out that the cost to do what he wanted to do to renovate the existing building was it was out of his hands. He couldn't make it work. Since that time, so that contract fell through. So since that time, according to Jerry Trent, there has been another developer, per se, looking at the property. And I haven't seen whether or not the actual offer came through. I know they were looking at possibility of turning that into maybe a microbrewery restaurant, which would be outstanding. I think they really liked the idea of being able to use the back side of it adjacent to the creek as a beer garden, sort of, as Alan would love it, I'm sure. And so that was one that was being kicked around. I need to follow up to see if they started their due diligence on that. There's been some concern about possibility of asbestos in that building, which is always an expensive item to have to mitigate.
Jim, does that mean that the idea of a pedestrian bridge over the creek would be appealing to them? Did you discuss that at all?
It absolutely would be. They really like the idea of being able to connect to the trail on the other side. So that if you did have a restaurant or, a beer garden or something, it would, be able to attract people from the other side of the creek. So yes, I think that's very interested. They're very interested in that. So I don't think, for one, it would be a real problem in us getting the easement that we need. But until they actually close on it, I don't see it happening. But it's also, I'm glad you mentioned that because I think that's a budget consideration.
Yes. And how about their parking situation? If they're talking about a larger retail establishment than anything we've seen in that building since I've lived in Manitou, are they going to find that on-street parking is adequate for their capacity? Or did you discuss that at all with them?
No, actually, that's part of their whole due diligence process. Obviously, they've seen the conditions, they know what they would have to build. but I don't know specifics as to, would they be putting parking around back? Seems like the only place to put it. And how much? I mean, all that's to be, ferreted out right now.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
That's all I really have going. At this time, we have to get, and you'll be discussing it later, the budget and getting that budget presentation ready for I believe it's the 14th of November for council. So that'll be taking up some time here pretty much after this meeting after you discuss the budget.
Any questions or comments for Jim? Okay, budget discussion, Ann.
I did finally remember that this had to go to the board by the 15th and barely made it, but it's mainly shows as it's required to show the 22 actual, the adopted budget, and then our estimated budget, which is quite different. And that's what we've always characterized as our working 2023 budget. And then the draft 2024. And one of the big question marks, and Jim, I have not been able to find whatever came from the assessor's office on the preliminary AV. So I may, or you may have to email somebody at the assessor's office and see if you can get that. Although I'm not really sure how helpful it's going to be because of the big increase in AV, it will affect entities very differently. Manitou's is debruced, so it doesn't really affect, they could raise their property taxes that amount and they're fine. Most of, if not all of the other taxing entities that we get property taxes from would have to reduce their mill levy to fit within the requirements under state statutes for either table or 5% thing. So what I did was take the number that Becca had in the presentation she did to council. She had estimated for 2024, primarily based on the fact that she was assuming the Holiday Inn property would be assessed at full value, and she was assuming its market value was $5 million. I don't know how accurate any of that is, Jim may, but the 225,000 is what she showed. So that's what I put in, and that's basically our only source of revenue. And then I've simply replicated what we showed in 2023 for our O&M expenses, taking out the DDA, and assume, and I believe Farley and I agree on this, there's one more Spirit of Manitou sculpture. So that would be $55,000 capital outlay. So I think the only real question is the property tax revenue number. And if we want to show, other than I showed $25,000 for facade improvement grants, and then the majority of the rest of it, which shows under site improvement grants, would be the $104,000 that Becca was estimating we would owe Holiday Inn Express from the property tax revenue. And then I just threw in another, whatever, 250 or 300,000 for an undefined redevelopment grant. Maybe the Martin property, maybe the Dillon, who knows? So it's really simple at this point. I mean, there's not many questions. I think it's clear we're not going to get any incremental sales tax revenue for the moment. So I think this would be, unless Jim has other ideas, this would be the basis for his presentation to council on the 14th.
And so the DDA money that's budgeted for this year, if it's not spent this year, does it roll into 2020?
Well, it should be spent this year. I mean, they
Is it?
have that contract, right?
Yeah, I just don't know where they are. Do you know where they are with that? I thought we hired somebody in
I
July.
thought
and
that
then
I thought that the contract had gone out and been selected, but I don't know that 100%. So, which means it would have been obligated this year. So
That's what, yeah, I just haven't heard anything since the summer. So I didn't know what was going on with it because the chamber hasn't,
You haven't paid
we haven't
yours?
paid our portion
Okay,
either.
well, let me circle back with Becca, because if it didn't get expended in 2023, then it would carry over to 2024.
Okay. Jim,
Debbie, and since this is a contract that the city has with a consultant, I would assume we could transfer the money to the city.
Right. We
Right.
could just go ahead and make payment to the city and they'll pay if they invoiced us
And
and said,
right.
this is pending, right? We're pending on this contract. I think that would work.
Yeah, and I can have that discussion with Becca. I could simply do that, and then they would have our contribution
Okay,
when the work's actually invoiced. Yeah.
okay.
okay. And then Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea was that we would probably, if the DDA moves forward, then we would be hiring possibly another consultant to help move it to the vote with a campaign and the ballot language, which is a different skill set than what we've hired for this part of.
Yeah, you're right. I think this contract is basically more of a feasibility, viability study type thing to see if there is a next step. So it's really too soon to even have a number as far as how much would be budgeted for that. And if, MSURA would be part of that, I don't know.
Okay,
Or if it's even an appropriate expense for us at that time. I mean, I don't know. I'm not intimately familiar with how we can and can't spend our funds in this kind of arena, but I would bet that if we're talking about taking something to a vote, then we're getting close to the line about what we can and can't fund.
okay.
I don't know. Something to look at.
For the time being, its safest thing is just to leave it in 2023. Don't put additional funds in 2024.
Any,
I think
yeah,
we just Jim and I need to try to figure out the property tax piece. And that may be the only thing that changes between now and when he has to put the presentation together for council. Unless we'll all have a different perspective as to that redevelopment grant line item.
I can call Roger Clark at the assessor's and see what he knows.
Right, good, thanks, Jim.
So just a hopefully simple question. If indeed we end up with a project on the Martin property and wanted to pursue the pedestrian bridge, we could transfer development grant money to that project, I assume.
We could,
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a pet project for me, so.
good point, yeah.
anything else, any other additional budget items or ideas for Ann and Jim for the moment? Okay, I just have one thing that I want to say out loud. I don't know if this is the right way to approach it, but I continue to be concerned about the fact that we're not fully meeting our obligations for the Holiday Inn Express tax rebate or TIF fund rebate. And so I would feel more comfortable if our budget reflected what the Holiday Inn Express is owed to this point. I think the issue that I have is that we don't know what that number is because we haven't received the information from the property owner. If we had that information, if Jim were able to obtain that information, is that something that all of you would be willing to put in this draft budget to present to council that says we're going to continue with the idea in mind that we're continuing to advocate for the sales tax money that accrued to the Holiday Inn Express since they started accepting sales tax, charging sales tax, that money be refunded to the owner per our agreement.
I would only agree to that if we show a revenue source as well?
Yes.
Because other than that, we're taking them off the hook if we do that.
No, that's exactly what I mean. What we
Okay.
would be doing is asking for a reconciliation. Through, I think last year he was able to provide us figures through like August for our November budget presentation. And then we showed the revenue as well. And we said we wanted the revenue transferred to us for at least that amount in order to refund to Avik what we owed the Holiday Inn per our agreement. That's what I'm asking for. I would agree with that and highlight it.
Right, big note
Also-
at the
Big,
bottom.
yeah, big-
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think if we can get, and Avik should be able to provide it to Jim, if we can get both, because we're 2 years now. He was owed money in 2023. He did not get. And so if
Me
we
too.
can get 2 years worth of estimates for that, I'd put it in as a revenue source under the TIF. And then I would show it
Mhm.
in the redevelopment grants. I would footnote it as to how much of that is the
Mhm.
property tax and sales tax rebate to Holiday Inn Express.
And,
Yes.
and I would actually suggest that at this point, we might want to create a new line item
Line
if it's appropriate, other than redevelopment grant, because we're not granting him the money. And I think part of the reason that we're in this pickle with the city council is that our language needs clarity, right?
Yeah.
We're not granting money to any property owner in this case. It's a development agreement that we're honoring. So whatever you call that, Anne,
Right,
I think a clearer budget line item would help.
okay, good point.
We're getting the thumbs up from Alan.
Yeah, I've always been really concerned that we show our commitments and our obligations. It's
Yes.
just, when
really
we
one-
were asked last month to just give up $850,000. I mean, we have obligations out there that are, it's just that simple. We have obligation.
Yes. So they need to be reflected in our budget.
Exactly.
Your budget is our planning document, not necessarily what we will actually receive, right? So we need to forecast all our obligations.
I think it'd be pretty simple. I can contact Avik. I'm sure they track that stuff, monthly. They were sending it to us monthly until the city, stopped paying it. Then I guess they saw no point in sending it anymore. So I can get it.
Okay, thank you. And as I recall, that agreement does require that interest accrue on any amounts that are not rebated in a timely way. So that obligation is accruing interest as well. So we'll want to make sure that however that gets applied, Jim, it probably Avik won't reflect that in his numbers, but you should absolutely reflect it in your calculation of what we would actually owe at this point.
Yeah, interestingly enough, it does. The development agreement does say that. However, it doesn't specify a interest rate. So we would just kind of maybe go with a prevailing, I don't know, CPI. I don't know if that's the right one to go.
Yes, so we're incurring debt along with this obligation. And that's our obligation. Yes. Okay. Any other direction for Ann and Jim about the budget? All right, moving along. Nancy, your report.
Thanks. You've already talked about the November 14th briefing to council, so that will be fun. We've approved loans for the water treatment plant upgrades, which are desperately needed. So that'll start soon, as well as to purchase the Mesa water tank. So we'll have redundant capability and can do the maintenance on the existing tank, which is long overdue. We got an update on the land use development code and made a few minor changes to it, nothing substantive. And that's done for the time being, and we're asking for regular updates on that. We looked at a pool feasibility study and we approved a roof contract to redo the roof because the pool is also horribly deferred maintenance and very, very popular with the residents. There's a very significant group of very passionate residents who want that pool fixed, and I don't blame them. And the pool feasibility study we looked at and provided some support to continue looking at is to replace the pools and some of the building structure as well, to the tune of about $3.5 million. But we asked staff to go back and look at funding strategies for that. And there's some grants out there that, fingers crossed, we'll be able to take advantage of. So in the next few years, we might get that done. And then look at a long-term study, more in the $24 million to totally do a new fitness center and recreation center. So it's kind of exciting. We approved the contract to purchase the Chase Bank property, which will be, the parking office will move in there at least in the interim, if not the long term, and looking at that to do a roundabout potentially for the buses so that they don't have to go down Old Man's Trail. So that's kind of exciting. One thing that I was particularly pleased at, we approved that the Housing Advisory Board and staff could go in and submit the city for certification under Proposition 123, which opens up a whole lot of funding opportunities for affordable housing. It does require us then to have, over the next 3 years, to have a total of 47 units, new units within the city under the affordable housing umbrella. So it's ambitious, but it'll be great if it works. And it's a very exciting proposition, and we're in at the ground floor. It needs to be in by November 1st, but I think that we're very close to getting that done. We approved the residential parking permit program for Pawnee and Cannon Avenue, Upper Cannon Avenue, sorry. So that was interesting. We approved the staff to go ahead and implement the e-bike voucher program. So that's for 100 e-bikes. I think we approved $75,000 for that program so that'll be implemented very soon. And it'll be for mid to lower income personnel within the city to get $1,500 grants to go out and purchase an e-bike. And then it's a pilot program to see how it goes. We got a briefing on a fleet management program, which is another thing I was excited about because we've been rather haphazard until recently on how we replaced vehicles, maintained vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. So they put in a very robust fleet management program, which I think will really help with efficiency when it comes to our vehicles in the city. And lastly, the big thing is we spent last Saturday being educated about our budget. Which is always a fun time, but staff did an outstanding job. It's pretty flat budget with as you heard last night, a $6 million reserve. And we can assume that $2 million of that is from URA funds. So any questions?
My only question is about that affordable housing process and whether or not there is an opportunity to do mixed use affordable housing along the avenue, because if that's the case, we might want to go take a look at that.
I would highly recommend that you do take a look at that, because one of the things that we're counting on is that once we're into the program, because staff doesn't have a lot of time to work on it, the Housing Advisory Board is going to spend their whole year doing nothing but working on a strategy for this to implement this particular opportunity. However, what staff is hoping is that developers will see that we're now in this program because they can access it directly.
Right.
So I think it would be a great opportunity for you guys to take a look at mixed use with using affordable housing.
And maybe a different way for Jim to be talking to developers and property owners along the avenue about a new opportunity to do mixed use. Our problem is the land use code, which doesn't allow the level of density that I think developers will find profitable for them to pursue. But okay, we'll get creative. We'll see what's possible.
See what's possible, yeah. And
Well, just as an example, if you took the LaFawn property and you tried to put, you couldn't put all 47 units on there because the density is not allowed.
Right.
You can only get 40.
You can only get 40 units on the
If it
LaFun
were-
property,
if
which
it
is
were-
2 acre.
Another thing is it allows us to go cross jurisdiction, so we could partner with Colorado Springs just on the other side of the arch to put in some units. One could purchase the land because there's a land bank component of it as well. So there's a lot of potential
we
in
have
Proposition
potential.
123.
Yes, we have potential. So at the very least, Nancy, if there is an opportunity for us to be speaking with the Housing Advisory Board, if you see a way to connect us, that would be swell.
They actually talked about that. The Housing Advisory Board does want to get with you guys and talk about
Good.
that as a potential as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Items of other business. Vote. Yes, Jim.
Just one quick note, I forgot to mention under my report. Still waiting to hear from city planning on, can we relocate the tree by the Holiday Inn Express sculpture somewhere else on site? Or was it required as part of the development plan? Avik does not have a problem moving the tree if we can find a place on site, and also if the city's okay with that. One concern, of course, is that it is a street tree and we have very few places for street trees along the corridor.
Right. And of course, it is the most lush of all the trees on the front of the property. It is the whole bunch. So it's the one we need to disturb in order for people to see that gorgeous sculpture. Oh,
One other
well.
option, and I know Colorado Springs does this, is that, as a tree matures and grows higher, you can limb up some of the branches. That's not 100% great solution, but it would at least not totally obstruct it.
Right. Good point. Your landscape architect hat comes in handy. Yes, John.
Well, looking ahead to next year's election of officers. I'm probably slated to be the chair. I think, well, first of all, I'm going to definitely miss the December meeting and the January meeting. December this year, January the following year, and probably the February meeting. So we might think about who, Debbie for another year, whoever, I don't think I should be the chair next year is what I'm saying, just because of those kind of time constraints. And to me, those are critical months.
And the problem is that our bylaws require a change of officers every 2 years. So
I think it's time to look at our bylaws. I mean, there's no reason for that.
just in time for my adios, my sign off as chair, you're going to look at the bylaws? Are you
I think we
kidding?
should. I mean,
I
it's
think
just
we do need
incredibly
to.
awkward to have this. You can only be in one position 2 years out of your 5-year term.
Mhm.
It's because it makes us rotate when rotating may not be appropriate.
Right.
Why that was ever put in there, I have not a clue, but I think it's time to revisit that.
Okay. I may or may not be willing to continue in this role.
Oh, okay.
There's lots
Depending on
of,
what happens
there's
in
lots of
November.
conditions
Yeah.
for my.
Has it been contentious?
Debbie, you certainly shouldn't miss a meeting.
My mental health is at stake potentially. I am happy to do that if we want to do that, if we want to revisit the bylaws. I think that would be an important conversation to have because frankly, the other thing I saw that we probably never do is have an annual meeting.
Yeah.
Which we're also required to have in January. So they probably do need a little cleaning up.
Yeah, I think regardless of whether or not you're willing to continue, they need cleaning up.
If that's the case, is this where we get David involved, where we have like a laundry list of things we want him to look at and he has a conversation with us?
Yes.
Can we tee that up for November?
Okay, then here's what I'm going to ask us to do, because clearly we're not going to do this here now. Jim, I want you to send out the bylaws to everyone and get in touch with David. And if we could all look at them and send Jim a note that says, here are the things that I think we should consider as possible changes. And then perhaps Jim and David and I can get together, have a little confab about what seems to be on the list for consideration and bring ideas to the table in November. Can that work? Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate you. In your proactiveness. Other items of other business. I just want to say one thing before we close, and that is that we were having in our informal discussion beforehand, a debrief about the candidate forum last night. And it was interesting to me how many times opportunities for new development in Manitou came up, and how few times the avenue, the URA territory was mentioned as a possible location for any of those opportunities. So I think we have a moment right now, because Plan Manitou, our cycle for revising Plan Manitou is coming up. I think we have an opportunity to get some new community input about what's possible along the avenue, spark a better community conversation next year about what we think is possible along the avenue, and perhaps even engage property owners and developers in new ways if we do it correctly. And that means a lot of things have to fall in place, potentially including a communication plan that works for us, and some different kind of engagement from all of us, which might include a visioning, planning something session of our own, where we just get to sit and talk about what we think is possible. So I just want you to be thinking about that, because until last night, I hadn't really put together how many how serendipitous this moment is, right? How excited people are, how people are talking about possibilities for Manitou. And I think we have a chance to harness that and kind of move forward with some new enthusiasm in the community. But we have to do it very carefully, because if the LaFun process taught us anything, it's that the misinformation rules the day if you don't get out ahead of these things. And I think we have an excellent story to tell, so we need to start telling it the right way. Okay, my moment on the soapbox is done now. Thank you all for listening and for coming and attending today and stepping up to help. Appreciate it. I'm going to call for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved by John, second by Farley. Jim, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Jim.